Funky Politics, powered by MLGW, Memphis Light, Gas, and Water.
You're listening to Funky Politics, powered by the Kazuki Network. DC, sitting along in this old chair over here, mine. Boy, it's comfy over here, Doc Ward. Would you like to trade with me? My chair?
Your chair?
Yeah, would you like to trade?
I could never feel your chair.
You are. Doc Ward, what's up, Doc? You all right, brother?
Wonderful. And we are at this segment now called Gumbo, where we hopefully provoke thought and promote community engagement and activity every time you hear the different opinions, voices, and thoughts of the many wonderful guests that we have on here. And who do we have with us today?
Well, today we've got Tosha Downey, Director of Advocacy for Memphis Education Fund. Hey, Tosha, how are you?
Hey there.
Good to have you with us once again.
Good to be here.
Luther Mercer, Memphis Advocacy Director, Tennessee Charter School Center. Brother Luther, how are you?
How you doing, sir?
Man, good to have you.
Thank you for having me back.
And let me tell you something. We have the one and only LLamar, Policy Associate with Sister Reach and the President of the Tennessee Young Democrats, not the Tennessee Old Democrats, but the Tennessee Young Democrats. Hello, London. How are you?
Hey, I'm glad to be here.
Oh, I like that. She had some spark in her. Hey!
Right. So all my folks in Hot Coffee, Mississippi, Gumbo, let's go. What's our first topic, sir?
You said Hot Coffee, Mississippi.
I say it all the time.
Well, I like.
That's where you from. I can see the hot coffee on your face.
Speaking about hot coffee and things that are keeping a lot of us up at night and probably thinking very strange thoughts as we get out of bed. The Philando Castile jury was returned, and unfortunately, believe it or not, well, I don't know if you can believe it or not, Luther, but the officer Yanez was found not guilty on all counts.
Right.
And I guess my issue with that is there anywhere in America, and let me say this first of all, it's just not in the South, and I don't want to make people think that all of this is happening in the South, because it's happening in Oakland, Santa Ana, it's happening in Decatur, Georgia, Madison, Wisconsin, Chicago, Illinois, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Minneapolis, Falcon Heights, Minnesota, Marksville, Louisiana. It's happening all over the country. Baltimore, Cincinnati, New York City,
Chicago, Illinois.
Will any person who has lost their life ever get justice in our court system?
Well, if I may, what I think we have to look at first of all is our history here in this country of injustice around the issues of minority communities. We can start there, but I want to address specifically police or state action being taken where men of color, women of color, minority communities, where people are killed during these stops, during these routine on-duty actions by police. I did something many years ago when some of these police actions first started taking place, and looked at some of these laws in these different states. And what you find is that there's, in some states, almost this impossible burden of proof that has been established to convict a police officer for malicious conduct during the line of duty. And so what I think we're going to have to do is go back and address at the source how we've gotten here. And one of those ways is that the law itself has provided an extra layer of protection for officers who act in this way, and given that burden of proof to be so high that some juries can't reach, based on those things, reach a proper verdict. I think that in the ways in which we've seen the actions on video that show what these officers have done.
You're listening to Funky Politics, powered by the Kazuki Network. Lamar, you were just sitting over there. You got that smile on your face. You're like, I'm going to get this one. I'm going to eat this one up. Go ahead, eat it up.
Well, speaking of just not looking at the laws that, give an extra layer of protection of police, but we also want to address the humanistic aspect of what is going on in our criminal justice system. You have officers who truly believe that African American people are criminals. So they're interacting with these people in these stops and in these communities as if they're already guilty before giving them an opportunity. Just like this officer with in Minnesota, he walked up to the car expecting to have a negative interaction because they're in these communities and they're looking as African Americans as we're already convicting the crimes, as if we're already criminals, as if it's going to be something easy for them, something that they expect. And so they don't look at the intersections of what's going on to for why our communities are being over policed. And so because we are constantly over policed, because there's this idea that African American people are criminals, you see it in the media, you see it reiterated in our textbooks, you see it reiterated in our conversations with people, not only among white people but ourselves. So they're acting as if we're already guilty, and they're treating us as so. And so in this situation, there's a devaluing of our life prior to the initial interaction between a black man and a police officer. So I think we have to also not only put pressure on the laws that are putting extra protection on police, but we also need to address how African American lives needs to be valued by those who are trusted to protect our community.
Wow, I like that. Doc, the legalese on this table. Are you speechless?
I'll offer legalese.
Yeah, there you go. I want to let her offer. I'm just I'm going to listen to everybody.
So a couple of things.
Judge.
So when we talk about why there is no orientation towards convicting, one, because what you don't want to do in judicial court and judicial systems is set precedent, right? Because the moment there is one conviction for a similar set of actions, then there now is a basis by which juries all over this country have to convict officers, regardless of, as Luther has indicated, the added layer of protection. So one, I think juries are afraid to begin to set precedent, and I think that district attorneys advise in such a way as to ensure that that doesn't happen. The second thing is that court systems also do not want to open themselves to liability. So once you offer up criminal convictions, you then open individual officers up for some capacity for victims or their families to recover damages for individuals when there is a criminal conviction. So there is some orientation to not convict in those instances to prevent that. And another point is that there are no reasonable capacity to keep blacks on juries, right? So when you think about the jury pool is made up of registered voters, it's also made up of people who actually have the flexibility to take the time off their jobs and who also have a willingness or a dispensation towards being on a jury. And when I hear most of my friends who say, I got a jury call, people want to try to figure out how to get out of that.
That's right.
And so when we are such a small percentage of registered voters and eligible jurors, that puts us at a disadvantage. So sure, large majority members may say, hey, a bunch of them are trying to get out too, but when you're 80% of the registered voters, you are disproportionately not going to end up with a jury of peers. And then the final point is that there is specific training that lawyers go through in the selection of juries. And so there is a clear incentive to rule out black jurors, jurors of color, jurors who may be sympathetic to communities where there is high levels of poverty or crime. And there is a very strategic level of training that happens through the process that's called jury selection. But then the final point, I think I said the other one was final point, was then there's also no orientation towards de-escalating situations, right? Like we are seeing around the country that white police officers have figured out how to not shoot and kill white people wielding knives, shooting guns, assaulting other folks. So there is a way that they have learned to interact with white offenders. They have not learned that, nor have they, nor are there any real willingness of police departments across the country to implement real strategies around de-escalation.
You're listening to Funky Politics, powered by the Kadukian Network. Judge?
Well, it just sounds to me, to make it all point blank, and kind of piggybacking off what Tosha was saying, and because I just get to the point.
Yeah. Until
a middle-class white person gets killed by the police unjustly.
Wow.
You're not going to have a change in the situation.
Amen.
It's one of those situations that it has to hit home.
It's got to affect me.
And it has to affect people that are sympathetic to the cause in order for them to change their behavior. Well, and as much as, I don't know if any of you all disagree with what I'm saying, but as much as people may want to disagree with that or say what I'm saying is racist, it's not racist. It's just reality. Well, and that's what we do.
Can I add to that?
Before you answer that, I want to give you an example.
Okay.
We're right now in the middle of what everyone says is one of the largest drug or narcotics issues
opioid addiction
in the history of our society. Now, you're seeing governors, You're seeing Chris Christie wanted to be one. Senators, members of the House of Representatives, all get up with these testimonials about how we need to be more sensitive to people that are on drugs, and how we need to be more, they need to subsidize screening and education and prevention and assistance to people that are on these opioids. Opioids, particularly what's the Wayne one, fentanyl, the one that actually the Prince
and heroin.
Right. Heroin mixed with fentanyl. Mm-hmm. And so, but years ago, when people were losing their hair, teeth, weight, lives on crack cocaine, most of us, what was the cry, the overwhelming cry, the reverberating clang? Lock them up. Lock them up. Stronger sentences, stronger penalties, mandatory minimums for crack cocaine. Right. Now, the opioid crisis, which affects people mostly that are not of color, sensitivity evolves. Yeah. So using that analogy, I would say the same thing about this situation.
Well, you know what? I would like to piggyback off this and say that you're absolutely right until it hits certain communities. Yeah. However, historically, that still hasn't mattered. The impact on our communities remains. The over-policing is not just something that just started.
But at least you'll have something to work from. Well, now we have very little precedent.
Well, we have precedent. I'm going to tell you what, the precedent has been with crack cocaine and powder cocaine. Oh, well. We always, had that differentiation of the law in relation to how someone was charged, and then criminal time, sentencing. So we've had this before. We continue to see this dynamic impacting over and over again in our community. And to add to that, I want to add something that Tosha mentioned. Mm-hmm. Back in the 90s, we started community policing. Community policing actually became something of a success in a lot of areas around the country, where you had people from the community who were police going back into those communities, riding bikes, remember, hanging out.
Building rapport.
Yeah. That was huge success.
And investing in the community, being a community partner.
Absolutely.
So what happened?
Exactly.
What happened with it?
There was a defunding of that from the federal level.
Because?
Overfunding of militaristic policing.
There it is.
Right?
There
at the federal level.
And so we lost that funding, and guess what? That community policing went away. But again, we've had some programmatic things that have been out there that have been successful to address some of these over-policing issues. And we've also seen, again, just to highlight that point of what you're saying, this historical context of minority communities being, as London mentioned earlier, valued or devalued. Devalued. And that goes to now a question of how do we address, I think, something as sinister and historical and socially systematic as that devaluing of human life in minority communities.
So you're saying if community policing worked and the numbers were lessening in the jails, then was there this huge, there was a meeting somewhere that said, look, we're losing out on a lot of funding somewhere. Somebody's not making a lot of money. Maybe we need to do away with community policing. And let's go back to strong arm tactics, and we can fill these places back up again.
Well, maybe it's like it's always been said, there's no money in the cure, there's money in the medicine. There's not money in solving the problem, there's just money in treating the issues as they go along. And that's what makes it funky, and that's why we're here. And you're listening to Funky Politics, powered by the Kazuki Network.
If I don't find something soon, my lights are going to get turned off.
How am I going to cook for these guys with no power?
I've already applied for so many jobs. I hope I can get this one so I can pay my utility bill.
What's this? Well, there's the perfect way to help my family and friends. Help someone you care about through MLGW's Gift of Comfort program.
I'll play the blues for you.
Blues in the Basement with Stephanie and T-Shaw.
Some great festivals going on around the tri-state area.
Got your dancing shoes?
Man, as long as I'm with you, baby, I'm always be on my toes.
Drop that zero.
Bring your blues, boo.
I got them.
We'll see you.
Thank you.
Blues in the Basement.
The thrill is gone.
Blues in the Basement, part of the Kazuki Network.
The thrill is gone away.
In our studio today, we've got Shelby County Mayor Mark Luttrell.
Thank you so much for the invite.
Thank you for accepting it. 'Cause you know that you could have been doing a bunch of other things.
You know,
but you're hanging out here getting funky with us. That's
and you know, it's interesting you say that, because the first time I was invited to be on this show, I didn't know what to expect. A little bit scared of what I was getting into, but you all are solid. You're real, and I appreciate the way that you handle this. I enjoy just pulling up your interviews and reading back over and listening to them and just learning a lot about the city.
So understand that the mayor is a fan of funky politics.
Powered by the Kazukian Network.
Get funky with it.